Tancred and the Tree. At the top of Thunder House, Tancred Torson surveyed the wreck of his bedroom. He kicked a pile of shoes out of his way and sat on the bed, or what was left of it. The mattress lay on the other side of the room, and his covers were in a tangled heap under the fallen wardrobe. Tankard was wearing his pajama bottoms and his green cape. Most of his clothes were torn or stained with food. He was tired of being angry, but he couldn't do anything about it. Little waves of fury kept spilling out from him, sending the air into turmoil. Mrs. Torson put her head round the door. "Are you coming down to supper, dear?" she asked nervously. "Do you trust me?" Tancred stared grimly at the floor. "Well, it's been a bit quieter today," said Mrs. Torson. "Sorry about the headaches, Mum," said Tancred. "You can't help it, dear, I know." Tancred's mother scuttled downstairs. There were days when she longed to live somewhere else, with a nice ordinary husband and a small, quiet son. But she loved her tempestuous family, and in spite of the headaches, she knew she could never be as happy with anyone else. Tancred followed his mother downstairs and took his place at the kitchen table. Mr. Torson was already tucking into a large portion of shepherd's pie. Mrs. Torson put a plastic plate in front of her son. She'd given up on China for the time being. "There," she said, spooning some pie into Tancred's plate. "It's about time you calmed down," Mr. Torson told his son. "This stormy bout has gone on far too long." Tancred's paper cup blew over. Luckily, it was empty. "I can't help it, Dad," he said. "I've tried, but I can't." "If you ask me, that hypnotizer's got something to do with it," boomed Mr. Torson. "Manfred Blower. He's put you into a real state, hasn't he?" "I don't want to talk about it," said Tancred as the hood of his cape suddenly blew over his head. "Control yourself," thundered Mr. Torson. The light above the table swung violently from side to side. "See, you're not much better," Tancred remarked. "I can direct the violence," said Mr. Torson. "What we have is a very useful talent, but talents have to be focused." "Yes, da." Tancred gritted his teeth, but the window behind him blew open with a loud clang. "Sorry," he mumbled. And then, through the window, a curious sound could be heard. It was hardly more than a whisper, but it had a strange effect on Tancred. He found that he was listening to music that was like no other music in the world. He stood up, straightened his cape, and carefully pushed back his chair. "What is it, Tancred?" asked Mrs. Torson, surprised by his unusually calm behavior. "I have to go," Tancred said gently. "Where?" asked his father. "Out there." Tancred pointed through the window at the dark trees in the wood. He strode past his startled parents and left the house before they had time to ask any more questions. The ragged moon threw a thin light through the trees, but Tancred didn't hesitate. He knew which way to go. Deep in the wood, he found what he was looking for, the source of the haunting music. It was a tree. The tree was red. The leaves that covered its slender branches seemed to burn with an inner fire, and the glade where Tancred stood was lit by a golden glow. Deep lines scored the bark, where water dripped slowly down the trunk. Looking closer, Tancred saw the water, too, was red as blood. He listened to the tree's hushed song. He felt a great stillness overwhelm him. His storms were there, deep inside, but Tancred knew he could control them. His strange talent had lost its grip on him. He left the tree when he was almost out of the wood. He looked back. The fiery light was gone, and the song had ended. "I kept your supper warm," as Mrs. Torson said Mrs. Torson as Tancred entered the kitchen. "What happened out there?" asked his father. "There was a tree there. A red tree. It was kind of singing, but not any sort of song I've heard before." Mr. Torson frowned. "I've heard of a red tree," he said thoughtfully. My mother told me a story that I was very young. Damned if I can remember it now. She said it was the Red King. "Our ancestor?" said Tancred. "My headache's gone," murmured Mrs. Torson. Tancred smiled. "I'm going to see my mates tomorrow," he said. "About time, too," said Mr. Torson. After supper, when Tancred was tidying his room, his mother appeared with a pile of clean clothes and sheets. She'd kept them hidden while he was in the grip of his storms, as she put it. "You look so much better now," she said. "Even your hair is lying down." "I am better, Mum," said Tancred. He had the best night's sleep he could remember. When he woke up, the mattress was still on his bed, and so were the bedclothes. He dressed quickly and had a very civilized breakfast with his family. Mrs. Torson even served his bacon and eggs on a china plate. After breakfast, Tancred walked down the hill to an imposing house, set behind ornate iron gates. He opened the gates, marched up the gravel drive, and pressed the bell. Lysander opened the door. "Hi, Sander," said Tancred. "Am I glad to see you?" said Lysander with a huge smile that almost split his face in two. "You coming to school, then?" "You bet," said Tancred. Charlie didn't know Tancred was back until he went to the king's room that evening. He had just put his homework on the table when Gabriel came running in. "Guess what?" said Gabriel. "I've seen Tancred." Charlie could hardly believe it. "That's fantastic," he said happily. Asa limped into the room. His bandages were off, but the scars on his hands were still red and painful. "What are you two smirking about?" he snarled. "Just a bit of good news," said Charlie. The room began to fill up. Emma took her place next to Charlie, and Billy came hopping in after Manfred. Dorcas was next, and then, at last, Lysander and Tancred arrived. "Hey, Tank," said Gabriel and Charlie. "Good to see you back," Emma added quietly. Before Tancred could reply, Manfred said, "Shut up. Get on with your homework. Tancred and Lysander, you're late." "Sorry, mate," said Tancred with a grin. "I'm not your mate," snapped Manfred. "Okay, Manfred," Tancred said pleasantly. It seemed to annoy Manfred even more. He scowled at Tancred, but couldn't think of anything else to say. Billy Raven gazed sadly at Manfred. "So sorry to hear your girlfriend's ill," he said, obviously hoping to earn a few sweets. Unfortunately, it had the opposite effect. What? Manfred glared at Billy. Zelda? Said Billy nervously. She's not my girlfriend, barked Manfred, and I'd advise you to mind your own business, Billy Raven. Yes, Manfred. Everyone put their heads down and began to work. In spite of the intense concentration in the room, Charlie was aware that somehow a weight had been lifted. There was a fresh and hopeful atmosphere. Now there are 5 of us, he thought, and only 3 of them. Dorcas was a puzzle. No one knew what her endowment was. Even when she was doing homework, there was a smile on her face. Charlie liked to think that she was neither on one side nor the other, but placed firmly in the middle. He looked up at the painting of the Red King. Would the tree appear again? And could he go into this painting? Would he hear the Red King speak? Manfred's voice cut into Charlie's thoughts. Daydreaming won't get you anywhere, Bone. Get on with your work. Yes, Manfred. Charlie was about to look away from the painting when he noticed a shadow fall behind the figure of the king. Gradually, the shadow took shape. It became a face beneath a dark hood, and Charlie became convinced that this dark figure was blocking him. It would never let him hear the king's voice or step any closer. Do you want detention, Bone? Shouted Manfred. No. Sorry, Manfred. I was just thinking. My homework's a bit difficult today. Charlie fumbled with his books. Just get on with it, grunted Manfred. Charlie kept his head down until the clock struck 8, and they were all released. Tancred and Lysander caught up with him as he hurried away from the king's room. Sanders put me in the picture, Tancred told Charlie. I hope I can help with your cousin's problem. I bet you can, said Charlie. Somehow I've got to get into the ruin. It must be on Saturday, when I'm not being watched. That means you'll have to get in from the other side. Lysander looked doubtful. It's dangerous, Charlie. There's a deep gorge with a river at the bottom. You'll have to scale the cliffs, and they're almost sheer. Charlie didn't like the sound of it. Maybe I could get in through a window in one of the towers if there was a distraction. He looked at Tancred. A storm? Asked Tancred. That would be great. Do you want me to keep the wand, Charlie? Lysander made a sweeping movement in the air. I think it would be safer with you, said Charlie. What are you 3 doing? Dr. Blore came marching up to them. You shouldn't be lurking about here. Hurry. Hurry along now. Yes, sir, said all 3 boys. They dared not say anything more to each other. With a quick grin, Charlie left the other boys and walked up to his dormitory. That night, Charlie found it difficult to sleep. He was haunted by thoughts of falling down steep cliffs and drowning in fast-flowing rivers. Next morning, he was so preoccupied he nearly went down to breakfast in his pajamas. Luckily, Fidelio was waiting for him. You'll be in trouble if you don't go down like that. I can't think properly. I keep wondering what'll happen to Henry if we don't get him out. We will get him out, said Fidelio, though he sounded much less confident than usual. Later that day, something happened that changed their moods entirely. When they went to the canteen for lunch, they were surprised to see Cook behind the counter. As Charlie came up to get his portion, Cook bent her head over a pan of macaroni and said in an undertone, I've had a message from Mr. Onimus. You're to go to the Pets Cafe at 2 o'clock on Saturday. Why? Said Charlie. Move up, Charlie, Billy whined from the queue. We're hungry. Fidelio stepped back on his foot. Ouch! Yelled Billy. Oh, so sorry, Billy, said Fidelio in a loud voice, taking advantage of the noise. Cook murmured quickly, It's going to be all right. Mr. Onimus has the answer. She raised her voice and said, Here you are, Charlie. Macaroni without peas. Yippee, said Fidelio, joining Charlie at his table. Something for veggies at last. He lowered his voice. I heard what Cook said, so cheer up, Charlie. All will be revealed on Saturday. The next day was Friday. During the first break, Charlie and Fidelio managed to pass on Cook's message to Tancred and Lysander. Gabriel had already been told, and he passed the news on to Emma and Olivia. After all, it was they who found Henry. You'll have to bring a pet, Gabriel warned the girls. I can lend you a gerbil each. I've got plenty to spare. Actually, Olivia said, I got some very nice rabbits. Emma accepted the offer of a gerbil. That evening, Charlie wrapped the painting of Scarpo in his pajamas. He put it carefully at the bottom of the bag, and then piled the rest of his clothes on top. Billy Raven sat on his bed watching Charlie pack. The others had already left, and the two boys were alone. Why are you taking that painting home again? Asked Billy. Because I want to, said Charlie. He used to feel very sorry for Billy, all on his own in the creepy academy every weekend. But he was sure that spying had brought the orphan a great many rewards. Bars of chocolate, late-night hot cocoa, fur-lined boots, and a powerful torch, to name but a few. I'll be off then, said Charlie, zipping up his bag. Have a good weekend, Billy. I don't think you will, said Billy. What did he mean? Charlie was too distracted by his own plans to worry about Billy's spiteful little digs. He rushed down to the hall where Fidelio was waiting for him. The two boys were the last to leave. On Friday afternoons, Dr. Bloor and Manfred always waited in the hall until the last pupil left the building. As Charlie and Fidelio walked towards the tall doors, Dr. Bloor stepped in front of them. I want to see what's in your bag, the headmaster said to Charlie. My bag, sir? Charlie was very glad he'd given Scarpo's wand to Lysander. Your bag, Bone. Empty it. Here, sir? Right here. He'll miss the bus, sir, said Fidelio. This is none of your business, Gun, barked Dr. Bloor. Run along. Fidelio didn't move. I'll wait for Charlie, sir, he said. Charlie opened his bag and turned it upside down. Clothes, shoes, and books lay in a pile on the floor. Manfred bent down and shook out every item of clothing and every book. Even Charlie's trainers were investigated. As the head boy picked up Charlie's pajamas, the painting fell out. There's only this. Manfred held the painting out to Dr. Bloor. Ah, very fine work, said Dr. Bloor. Nothing else? Look in the bag, Manfred. Manfred felt inside Charlie's bag. He ran his hands along the lining, shook the pockets, lifted the board at the bottom. Please, sir, we're going to miss the bus, Fidelio said bravely. Then you'll have to walk, won't you? Snapped Manfred. Nothing here, Dad. He threw the bag at Charlie. All right, you two. Get out of here. The two boys managed to just catch their bus, but as it traveled around the city, Charlie began to have doubts about his uncle. Suppose he was still in the hospital. Suppose his sisters had done something even worse. Peyton had looked so ill when Charlie last saw him. How could he possibly recover in time to help Henry? Charlie ran down Filbert Street, dreading more bad news. When his mother opened the door of number 9, Charlie's worst fears were confirmed. Mrs. Bone never came home this early. "What's happened?" breathed Charlie. "Nothing, my love." His mother kissed his cheek. "I just took the day off, had some shopping to do." Charlie stepped into the hall. "Is Uncle Peyton—" "He's up in his room. A bit sore, but nothing serious." Wow. Charlie dropped his bag and rushed upstairs. For the first time in his life, he burst into his uncle's room without knocking. Peyton was sitting at his desk. "Hello, Charlie," said Peyton. For a moment, Charlie didn't know what to say. He was so relieved, so overjoyed, in fact, to see his uncle. A hug would have been appropriate, he thought, but Uncle Peyton might be embarrassed. I'm so glad you're better," said Charlie at last. "Me too. You should see my bruises. They're very impressive." Charlie could see a cut and a large bruise on his uncle's forehead where the bandage had been. "Your head looks very, colorful?" Peyton laughed. "That's nothing. The others are works of art." He patted the arm of his rather shabby velvet jacket. Lowering his voice, he added, "They didn't finish me off, though." "Do you think they really meant to?" asked Charlie. Payne shrugged. "Who knows? With sisters like mine, anything is possible." "Uncle Payne, I've got a lot to tell you," Charlie said gravely. "I'll bet you have. Run along, have your tea, and then we'll discuss." Charlie went down to the huge Friday spread that Macy would provide to make up for the Academy's meager rations. "Doesn't your uncle look grand, considering?" said Macy. "Did they find out who did it?" Charlie asked tentatively. "I mean, will they be sent to prison?" "It was a hired car," Amy Bone told him. "And the driver was blonde and dark glasses. That's all they know." A wig, thought Charlie. Uncle Payne knows, but he can't prove a thing. He bolted his enormous tea as fast as he could and ran up to see his uncle again. Peyton had actually cleared a space on his bed for Charlie to sit down. He had never been invited to sit in his uncle's room before. The candles had been lit, and the oil lamp gave the room a cozy glow. Charlie told his uncle everything from the moment he discovered Henry's capture to his escape from the sorcerer. Peyton did not interrupt, though he gave a low whistle when Charlie described Olivia's night with the giant toll rock. "I knew you'd find the wand," said Peyton. "So, a friend of yours now has it." "Lysander," said Charlie. "I trust him. He saved me from Scarpo." "But you have the book? You'll have to use Welsh to command the wand, you know. It's the only language it will understand." Charlie nodded. He'd already learnt some words and repeated them to his uncle. "Samuda Gorigium." "Move that rock." Uncle Peyton nodded approvingly. "But it's pronounced like this, Charlie. Sumidar Garig Uma." I'll practice," said Charlie. "It's lucky that Miss Ingledew found the Welsh dictionary. It was lying in the gutter after your accident." "It was very lucky. She's a remarkable woman, Miss Ingledew." "Are you friends again?" Charlie asked tentatively. Peyton went slightly pink. I believe so. Then he gave a light cough and asked, So, what's your next plan? Tomorrow, me and my friends are meeting at the Pets Cafe. Mr. Onimus sent a message. He says he has the answer. But I don't know what that means. How can he rescue Henry? The Pets Cafe, Peyton murmured. The Pets Cafe. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Aha! I should have remembered. He gave a delighted chuckle. There's an old passage, long forgotten. It's mentioned in one of these. He tapped a pile of books on his desk. It leads underground from somewhere in the old city walls right into the center of the ruined castle. No one knows where it starts, but I'll bet you anything Mr. Onimus knows. He has a wonderful underground burrowing look to him. In the Pets Cafe? Charlie exclaimed. Without a doubt, said Peyton. Charlie, get a bag packed. Tell the mother you're coming to the coast with me on Saturday night. I don't understand, said Charlie. Tomorrow, you're going to get Henry out of that pit. You'll take him back to the Pets Cafe, and there he'll have us stay until nightfall. You'll come back here, tell me that all is well, and together we'll drive to the cafe, collect our poor lost relation. And where will we take him? Ah, you'll have to wait and see.